The vile brat was born, that's what his father said when he first looked at his son, and that's how his misfortunes began when he was born. At that time, Kajin, a child blessed with the sword of the god Kasaka, was born with an excellent body and talent, but he is not a Kajin. His own mother and father were disappointed with the child, because he was born without a right hand, and his emaciated mother, every night instead of a lullaby, the mother wished her newborn child a speedy death. However, the baby desperately wanted to live and was not going to die, and he also heard that his father, while he was in his tummy, said that this child was their hope and he would not let anyone beat him, especially his brother. The father hoped that his child would be able to beat Kajin, but the guy was born one-armed and not blessed by the gods. He was a disgrace who killed the hopes of his parents, and his story began. The fair-haired child named Kajin was pampered by the maids and played with him. They were surprised by the beauty of this child. Meanwhile, the woman was spying on her nephew. As it can be seen, he has already started walking, while her pathetic offspring is not developing a bit. When the black-haired man could barely get up and start taking his first steps, at the same time, Kajin already knew how to hold a blade, and when the guy learned how to wield a sword, his cousin had long ago learned mana and began learning the art of fencing at Samion's school. The black-haired man's mother desperately wanted Kajin to be her child. At a certain point, Kajin became an object of admiration and envy for the black-haired man. When one-armed was 7, he was assigned to Kajin as a servant. He was sent outwardly for friendly help, but the truth was that his own father sold him for 300,000 ladens. The guy had a lot of scars and he was bleeding, and our hero's name is Daven. He was tied to a tree, while his cousin stood over him and gloatingly laughed at such a damn loser, after which he continued to whip his toy. Kajin did not like him from the very beginning, and he was one of those on whom he could calmly vent his anger. But Daven did not give up. He had to restrain his tears. It was hard to tolerate the fact that many adults who betrayed him did not pay attention to what had happened. His uncle was known as an incredible man. He left the family many years ago and never came back, and because there was no one there who could control Kajin, he grew up a sadist. And despite the fact that he easily won any sparring, his excellent talent and the blessing of the sword god became like poison for him, and even after his opponent admitted defeat, the bloodthirsty boy did not stop there. Soon it was Daven's turn. He is fiercely jealous of his brother's strength and talent, and wants to be the same. But no matter how hard he tries with the help of envy alone, he cannot overcome the talent he has eaten. He was thrown into a stone column and the tile was filled with blood, but Kajin didn't care. On the contrary, he was angry at how this handless loser dared to stare at him, after which the talented nobleman began to trample on the poor man. The blonde-haired man laughed at the fact that the youngster really hoped to overcome him thanks only to hard work on himself, but even his whole life would not be enough for this, and despite his miserable situation, the red-eyed kid still wants to win. Although his dreams were unattainable just by hard work, unlike his brother, he is not going to become lazy like Kajin. The blonde brother began to indulge in alcohol, girls and drugs, but despite this, the black-haired one still could not beat him. However, the Berserker is going to surpass his Lemite and defeat his brother. The Colosseum is the arena of life and death. The two brothers fought once again. Kajin throws the kid away, but he is not the same as he was before. Daven uses his skill and cuts the arena in half. Because of the dust that had risen, the blonde-haired man was put in a difficult position. No matter how hard he tried, he could not see his one-armed partner, but Daven was not in the smoke at all, but from above. Kajin managed to react to this attack and block it with his sword, after which a huge explosion was heard in the arena. Those present were amazed. The one-armed Daven defeated the assault sword of Kajin. Up to this point, the official score of the warrior was to win 1 duel and 21 defeats, and now, when he turned 29 years old, he was able to defeat the one he envied the most in the world. In unofficial duels, he lost countless times, and many people told him to give up every time he lost. They made a mockery of him when they themselves were talented idiots wasting their time, but despite everyone he won. And now the Trubins were raising the name of a new hero. Daven is interested in his talented brother. How long did he think that he would always be the strongest? However, the defeated Kajin could not accept defeat from some loser. It kills his self-esteem. The black-haired fighter, who was standing, recalled the words of his own parents. They wanted him to be the same as his cousin, but if he really had such a talent, he would not have thrown him out into the air, as Kajin did. At this moment, the blonde boy could not stand the moralizing from the loser and his eyes were filled with anger. The warrior continued to chastise the loser, because he would not have led such a dissolute life and was not a pathetic coward. After he finally won, he turned around and walked away from the arena, because that was the end. With the end of his life, the cowardly Kaijin pierced the guy from behind. The audience was shocked, because the famous Kaijin was so low that he attacked from behind, but Daven was not very surprised. His brother remained vile until the very end. But despite this, the red-eyed guy did not regret his fate for a moment, although it hurt, but still he was happy that he finally defeated Kaijin, and it looks like he should not have lived. The famous swords of the sun, which are passed down, and used only in the Samion family, these blades also contain mana from the Samion family, antidemonic mana. If the wonderful Saint Rayla had not appeared, then he would not have had a chance to survive at birth. But now Kaijin will be remembered as a loser. After the words said with a smile, the guy died. A berserker wakes up in one of the prison cells and does not realize his situation. Did he die and go to hell? However, this is not so. The guy turned out to be lucky, because Saint Rayla was present at the arena, and being a saint, she healed the disgusting and dirty Daven. She is the very embodiment of a miracle. But the guy still doesn't understand how he stayed alive. Because his whole body is wounded, the only thing he can do is breathe. At this moment, the formidable executioner wants to know if the one-armed warrior has made a deal with the devil. However, the black-haired guy asks again in surprise, because he does not understand what it is about. But the man does not see anything surprising in this, because the only way for a loser like him to defeat Kaijin is to sign a contract with the devil. The butcher says that there is no point in denying anything, since his parents said the same thing, and bottles of blood were found in his house. And it became clear to everyone that he was a demon who sacrificed 300 innocent children in order to become stronger. After that, the masked bully declares that the young Mr. Kaijin cried after he had to stab his beloved cousin and friend in order to preserve the honor of the family and protect the city from the demon. After hearing the nonsense, the guy just laughed. Even though he defeated Kaijin, he could not overcome the Samion family, and as one could understand, they chose a blonde talent instead of him. Soon the executioner reads out an official document stating that Daven has tarnished the honor of his family, and now his mana will be sealed, and he will serve a life sentence, suffer for eternity, and rot in prison. That's his near future. The black-haired man realized that his tendons on his legs and arms were cut, and his mana was sealed with a large number of chains, so he was imprisoned. Even blindfolded, he immediately realized that Kaijin was standing in front of him. The coward with a smile on his face noticed that this place was very suitable for Daven, and also stated that from now on he became the Emperor of Swords. People praise him for being a hardworking genius, and all this thanks to a one-armed loser. After dinner, Kaijin left him. Soon most of the food stopped being delivered, and over time the boy became very thin. He was tormented by terrible hunger. He also coughed up blood. He did not imagine such a death. He wanted to die in the arena with honor. In a half-dead state he fell to the ground, and then Daven noticed that it was too cold here. Finally he wondered what would be his end if he were not one-armed? If the black-haired one was from the main line, and if he was blessed by the sword god Kasaka, would his life be different? He didn't want to die, he wanted to live. At the same time, he clearly heard a drop of water, and after a bright light, in the end he did not believe in his death. The red-eyed guy is addressed, but he does not react. Then Zwosea especially grabs Vincent by the shoulders and he comes to himself. The guy does not understand what is happening. Why does he feel pain on the shoulder? Is this really a dream? But soon he realizes that this is real, because the pain feels real. And this man in front of him, although Daven saw him for the first time, but he clearly knew this man from side families. At that moment, Daven realized why he was called Vinzen. He has a different name? The seventh son of Aiden. He did not understand with all his desire what was wrong with his memories. But among all his dreams, this one is not so bad yet, and the air here seemed very fresh to him. There was no sharp musky smell here, as in prison, and also here he has a right hand. What else do you need to do? Is this really a gift that was given to him before he died? At this moment, he is tired of being ignored by the youngster, and he tries to force the boy to speak with the help of force. But the fighter knows well the way to block this type of attack. Namely, physically distancing himself from the enemy. However, something strange happened. The man in the red clothes flew to the end of the room. Even the black-haired boy himself did not expect such power, because this attack is not so strong to push a person so far. The guy apologizes and says that his hand slipped, after which he tries to help the victim get up, but the man beats off his hand and rises up and declares that only because the black-haired guy from the main family, his son will definitely crush Vincent, and this will be the first time when the side family will crush the main one. After hearing these words, Daven realizes that this man in front of him is the same as his father. He always wanted to defeat his older uncle, and the moment he realized that his dreams were not feasible, he began to shift his dream onto the shoulders of his child, and it bore fruit, because red-eyed became inappropriate for them a child. The blond man turns around and before leaving the boy warns him that he will not forget today's arrogance and rudeness of Vincent. Now he has to wait for the reckoning during the meeting of true swords. After the door slammed shut, utter silence reigned in the room, and the black-haired man was able to calmly exhale. Sitting down on a chair, he again wonders if this is a dream? He had a feeling that he was about to wake up, when suddenly other memories flooded into his head. According to them, it becomes clear that Vincent's own mother immediately left him after birth, and the guy's father never took care of him. All the other kids treated him like a scapegoat. Of the 8 children of the famous Adenka sword family, he is Vincent, the 7th legitimate. The black-haired man was quite weak and cowardly in his time, so he constantly cowered in his room and cried after beating his youngest of the family. Her name is Loa. As a result, he became an ugly duckling abandoned by others in the main family of Aiden. Someone from a side family was hunting for the superiority of the main branch. That's how the one-armed Daven from the Samion family became a useless Vincent from the Adenka family. He is fully aware of what is happening, but does not even know what this phenomenon is called. In any case, he does not understand anything about such things. At this thought, he gets up from his seat and goes and stumbles upon the diary of Vincent's past. In it, he deeply regretted that he could not do what his older sister and brothers did. All his relatives from a side family are looking for any opportunity to crush everything around him. Even the servants completely ignore him. On this he regrets that he is defective, and wishes for his death. After reading enough, the black-haired man closes the manuscript. This diary is full of self-destruction. It looks like his predecessor's score has fallen as low as possible. Apparently God has heard his prayers. At a time when Daven wanted to live, even in the worst situation, Vincent constantly gave up and always wanted to die. He hoped that everything had happened exactly as he realized, but an unknown voice called out to him and said that no one would believe in this kind of explanation. The guy turned around abruptly, but found no one near him, and the voice in his head did not subside. At the same time, Daven decides that a demon is trying to deceive him, because his reincarnation should not have happened. But this is far from the case, and the voice inside him belonged to the original owner of this body, namely Vincent. But after he gave his body to the Berserker, he no longer has a name and asks to be called Yulion. The ghost appears before the black-haired man and he does not realize how what is happening is possible, but the answer is simple: it is a blessing. At the same time, Daven recalls a similar thing he had heard before, something about this thing that God gives and people blessed from birth can hear his revelation. At the same time, it comes to the red-haired one: is God in the flesh before him? And yes, that's the way it is. The blonde figure in the eyes can be called a younger god. Initially, he intended to summon the Boha spirit, but for some reason, Daven got into the body instead. In order for Yulion to become a real god, he must fulfill the necessary number of achievements. The gods call it destinies. And as soon as he fulfills all his purposes, he will be able to become a real god. Daven listened attentively to the spirit. He realized the circumstances of the newcomer, but the black-haired one himself is not a bit interested in these events, and if God has finished his speech, the red-eyed one will gladly bow out and start his new life, because he does not want to waste his newfound life in order to listen to the wishes of some ghost. The bespectacled man confirms with a smile that he gave up in his past life and understands perfectly well that the one-armed man wants only one thing. However, the spiritual energy of God is incredibly weak, and if it completely disappears, then the body of the black-haired boy will die after him. But Daven is in no hurry to believe in such nonsense, because this body is incredibly healthy for death. At the same moment, Red-Eyed feels incredibly weak and loses consciousness, so Yulion let him know how naive he was. But in the future they will have to work together, and the ghost is going to show him his real memories. At the same moment, the events of the past years were thrown into the lying body of the boy. They were scorching and sharp like real lightning. Various name-calling only rained down on the guy. He was trampled all his childhood, but even in spite of this, he did not despair no matter what. Vincent was working on planning his revenge while playing the coward. Soon Daven came to himself. He was shocked with the thoughts of a 30-year-old. The guy was horrified with what kind of world he had reincarnated into. However, Yulion was pleased with his past, because his game at one time was excellent. he had to avoid family supervision, and the subjects he wanted to study were considered by the apostle level. After the boy has listened to Yulion, he clarifies whether the black-haired one knows about the archdemon Daven and the hero King Kajin. Hearing such sayings, the young man's eyes filled with anger, and getting up from the chair, he looked at the floating ghost with surprise and asked with rage. This something happened 500 years ago. The one-armed swordsman Daven escaped from the prison of Samion. The story goes that while using a contract with a demon, he destroyed thousands of lives in order to become stronger. It is said that he killed more than 10,000 people, so he is marked in history as the greatest demon. Hearing this, the boy cooled his ardor. Because he could not have moved 500 years into the future, it makes no sense, and on this he decides that there could be many people with similar names. But what are the chances that Daven and Kajin will both end up in the same Samion family lineage? At the same time, he realizes that it was he who died 500 years ago in prison. The Samion family preferred the assault sword at one time, abandoning the one-armed swordsman, and while Daven died alone, Kajin became the emperor of the sword. But it really pisses him off how they dared to distort history and invent a great demon. It's complete crap. Out of anger at Samion's family, the guy hits his hand on the table. But the ghost, fascinated by the story, admired her, because how romantic it is that the hero Kajin was a friend of the great demon, and loved him very much. But an angry Daven knocked over a stack of books and politely asked to carry this nonsense. However, Yulion did not understand why the youngster was angry, and the black-haired man in a fit of feeling announced that the whole story was a lie. The blond man was genuinely surprised. He did not know that the guy came from those times. At the same time, the spirit realizes that an old man is standing in front of him, and he hurries to calm Daven, because in any case, history is just a collection of stories written by the winners of history. At the same time, the black-haired man wondered since when 13-year-olds began to speak so competently in this world, but the answer was simple. Children will grow up very quickly at this time, and the present is very different from the long-forgotten past. But Daven is tired of these empty conversations and exhaling. He asks his interlocutor to be silent. However, Yulion continued the story and told that the hero king swallowed his tears and worked with the greatest hero of that time, his best friend, the Emperor of the Sun Sword, to defeat the great demon Daven. But something red-eyed does not recall any Emperor of the Sun Sword. And the ghost, surprised that the youngster does not know about him, tells that the hero's name is Arslan, and he is also the ancestor of the Adenka family. At the same time, the black-haired man finds a smile on his face. He knew this boy and was pleasantly surprised that he became the first head of the Adenka family. At one time, Arslan was a fan of the one-armed Berserker. The blue-eyed boy admired the fighter and dreamed of growing up as strong as Daven. Despite the fact that Arslan was a child, he was his friend, as well as a student. Arslan visited him several times while he was in prison. The guy refused to believe that his teacher could commit crimes, and he was going to ensure that the truth defeated evil in order to restore the honor of the great warrior, and he didn't care how long it would take for this good deed. After that day, Daven did not see Arslan anymore. At this moment Yulion interrupts the thoughts of the black-haired man. The fact is that just the same the first head of the Adenka family, Arslan, left them a life mission, and this concerns the achievements of the ghost. The two of them will have to surpass the Samion family and face the truth. Arslan Fokker renounced his family and created the Adenka family. It was for the sake of revealing the shocking truth. Adenka is a new family that was created to restore his honor. It is clearly fate that he was reborn here. It turns out Daven was called here to fulfill the mission that was given to the Adenka family, and if he fulfills it, then Yulion will become a god. That's exactly what will happen, but on top of everything, Daven will be able to stand up to the real owners of this body, and also the blonde promises that if he becomes a true god, he will give birth to the black-haired one with a real blessing. The red-eyed man silently approaches the sword hanging on the wall, and in his heart he is grateful to Arslan. He will gladly inherit the mission left from his old friend and will definitely surpass the Samion family, and climb above the family that betrayed him, becoming part of this family. Soon he goes outside with the annoying ghost, and Yulion wants to know where the old man went. But Daven is angry at such a nickname, and he asks not to call him that. But the blonde can't do anything, because if the red-eyed man lived 500 years ago, then he's definitely an old man. Hearing this, he simulates another call to another world. At the same time the ghost flies up and grabs the guy by the hand so that he stays and calls him Vinzen. Such an appeal to him suits him. At this moment, the guys hear the sound of sparring, and turning to the left, they saw an armed battle. Daven wondered what kind of martial arts people were doing at this time, or how the techniques he knew had improved during this time. This promises to be interesting, because the one-armed berserker will face the descendants of the Kajin in the future. However, at this moment the guy becomes restless. Suddenly his body became heavy and he lost consciousness. This child's body disappointed him, because it gets tired too quickly, and he also notices that it is in a disgusting state, because if Red Eye does not control mana, he will not be able to live a normal life. Suddenly, the black-haired guy feels a strange flow of mana and begins to call Yulion with all his might. He flies up to the elder in a half-asleep state, and wonders why he called him at such an hour? But Daven is shocked, and wants to know why Yulion didn't study fencing earlier. However, he explains this by the fact that he has a disability that does not allow him to learn this art. But Red-Eyed is not satisfied with this answer, and he asks again why. But the blonde-haired man can't give a whimsical answer, he was just born that way. But an angry Daven says that the guy had a sacrum, why didn't he study fencing then? Yulion flies away from the man and does not understand what else is such a sacrum, and why is he making such a scandal because of it. At the same time, Daven explains that if there is a sacrum, mana can be stored in any part of his body, and to be more precise, he could store it in bones. But the ghost in pajamas hears about this for the first time. Scratching the back of his head, the black-haired man tries to explain more clearly and says that a martial artist badly needs to use mana in order to have strength superior to that of an ordinary person. And the mana that works miracles is usually stored in the human heart. But if you have a sacrum, then things take a different turn, and in addition to your heart, the owner of the sacrum can store mana in his bones, which also means that he can use mana indefinitely. Yulion had no idea he possessed something like this. But Daven is afraid that his ghostly friend did not understand the importance of the sacrum, because the well-known bastard Kajin, whom everyone calls the Hero King, also had a sacrum. What an irony! Daven, who was reborn with a sacrum like Kajin's, was jealous of this all his past life. But the world after 500 years is much stranger than he expected. The ghost told the boy that he could not convey the image of the heart to him, but this news did not even upset the black-haired one, because this is the first time he hears about such a thing. Yulion was shocked that Grandpa doesn't know about this and decides to try to explain. The image is an imaginary storage for mana. But after hearing this, Daven was already shocked. Do people not keep their mana in their hearts at this time? And then what happened to meditation? But the blonde man didn't even know what it was. But the black-haired man did not understand how important it was, because Arslan had an excellent method of meditation for storing mana in his heart. But in the present time, they have long refused to store mana in the physical body, and also at the same time declares that there are even records of such an ancient method in the past. Now everyone stores mana in an image that they call a star, and the number of stars used denotes the strength of a martial artist. This means that an adult in this family creates at least one image. The requirements for people with one star are the first connection with the image and the feeling of mana, which means that the image was created to avoid the risks that can occur when storing mana in the sword. In the well-known past, more than half of the martial artists died from storing mana in their hearts, due to the fact that it exploded. But this will not stop Daven, because to become known as a full-fledged martial artist, you need to take such big risks. However, the ghost fundamentally disagrees, and besides, he notices that Red Eye allows mana to spread everywhere, and then mentions the cycle formula. The black-haired man turns and clarifies, is there really a formula for mana flow? And yes, it is there. So Yulion asks not to be allowed to pour out mana so thoughtlessly. The black-haired man says that in his time, the magic power of this cycle often wrapped up and exploded in about half of the practitioners, and they died. But the ghost asks to be careful from now on, because this is not his body. However, Daven is interested in why Yulion did this to a valuable body. After all, he has a wonderful sacrum, and a heart with a magic cycle is also strong. He would definitely succeed if he trained carefully. The sacrum is a structure necessary to contain mana, but consuming it and his sacrum has been severely depleted for the last 13 years, and if this continues, the body of Vincent Adank will die before reaching maturity. Night has been reigning in the courtyard of a huge castle for a long time, but this does not prevent Daven from self-development. Meditation will delay his death, but there is also a limit to this. He has about 10 years left. However, this is quite a lot, because Kajin has become the emperor of the sword in such a time, and the one-armed swordsman has long been forgotten by the world. The same amount of time Daven was locked up in an underground prison, slowly dying of hunger, striving for life. Those events were incredibly scary for him and lasted for an eternity. At that moment, there was a lot of knocking on Vincent's room and asking him to open the door. But Daven didn't even have time to get up as a man appeared on the threshold. Rising up, the guy briefly looks into the memories available to him, and from them he learns that the impudent man standing in front of him is called Wilson, and he is also the one who, 3 years later, Yulion was going to cut his throat. He doesn't have any more thoughts about this guy. Daven does not hesitate to throw his clothes to the impudent servant, and orders Wilson to clean his room, as well as bring him clean clothes. Today, the smug servant was surprised. He did not recognize the weak loser with whom he was familiar earlier. Wilson is interested in what his young master was doing, since he made such a mess in the room, and suggests is it possible that the loser was conducting some kind of strange experiment, or something like that. However, the black-haired man refutes the conjectures of the servants, but Wilson cannot believe in something like this and declares that the kid has gone crazy because he was constantly ignored. The youngster must have studied dark magic or something worse, and he is going to report this to the general manager and also the head of the family. But Daven listens to these threats only with a smile on his face, because it is rare to see a gentleman who will be so polite to such an impertinent servant. It is quite amusing for the black-haired descendant of Aiden to observe that Wilson continues to insist that his master has refuted him, and also he dares not to listen to the orders that he gave personally. Although he gave more tasks than usual, but the work of the servants is unconditionally to fulfill the requirements of his master. But after hearing this, the man refuses to do things that he does not like. Will he do such a thing? And at the same time, the seriously angry Daven says that the impudent man will do just the same. But soon Red-Eyed decided to do something else. Since Wilson does not want to do his job, then the youngster will have to do everything himself, namely, he is going to come to the chief manager, whom the servant mentioned, and ask him to bring him clean clothes, because who else would do it if Wilson does not want to work? At the same time, the guy grimaced with anger, but he had no choice but to take dirty clothes and get to work, and he also declares that he has never refused his duties, so he asks to leave everything else to him. The irony is that no matter how cowardly and sensitive Vincent is, the servant cannot behave so insolently and arrogantly with him. Most likely they deliberately behave this way next to him, and the previous owner of the body also thinks so. At the same time, the red-eyed one assumes that most likely they probably want him to solve the problem of an unruly and rude servant, and show what the seventh young master of the Adenka family should be. But the ghost is worried, because there are rumors that Wilson used to be a member of a gang and killed a large number of people, but in response to this heresy, the one-armed man only laughed, because a man who took many innocent lives has a certain energy. And he did not feel such energy from the boy, and also the red-eyed one is sure that he is a coward. But Yulion doubts his words, and how can Daven know so well about all this? The answer is that he lived a fucking shitty life. Hearing such words, the ghost was horrified. Did he really summon someone scarier than the spirit of the king? Soon Wilson came into the room. He was carrying clean clothes for his master, and he also wondered if he liked his cleaning, and also asked not to turn the room into a battlefield anymore. And David promises to do just that, and he also thanks the guy for cleaning. Wilson notices that the loser becomes more obedient, but at the same moment the red-eyed man asks the servant to bring him a wooden sword about 1 meter long, and it should also weigh about 500 grams and consist of ebony. But the arrogant Wilson asks what will happen if he refuses to do it? But there's nothing to be done. Apparently Daven will have to go himself again, and the guard who asks why the gentleman came in person, to say that his personal servant refused his duties. Wilson should know like no one else that the guards of the storerooms are outstanding martial artists, and they are also very loyal to the direct descendants of the family. The confused guy asks why the youngster is behaving like this again and grabs him by the shoulder, but at the same second he finds himself lying on the ground. Daven apologizes for this. He has bad memories of being attacked from behind, so he reflexively knocked over the boy and asks him to remember this lesson well, but in fact, even though his words are loud and cool, but his whole body screams in pain because of such an unusual load for him, but he tries very hard to keep his bold image and not show it. Meanwhile, Wilson curses his master with all his heart behind his back, but Daven notices this and asks the servants if he wants to say something, but at the same second the boy shrinks and becomes an obedient dog who asks the parameters of the desired sword. Soon a guy with a wooden sword in his hands goes to the young master's room. He promises himself that next time he will not lose to the youngster, and show him all his greatness. The guy imperiously shows the right thing to his master, but does not hurry to give it away. Then the red-eyed decides to tell him a short story, namely, He says that among his acquaintances there was a man without a right hand and it was very difficult for him to live without it, and in the end he met a very terrifying end. The servant took the hint, and immediately stood up in a venerable stance and hurried to hand the weapon to Daven, but in his heart he cursed himself for bending under the loser, after which he bowed out and left the chambers of the seventh descendant. Now the black-haired man was left alone with a wooden sword, and this is a great time for his little training. A blow is struck at the target. The red-eyed one went to the training ground to practice. Parent knew that this body was incredibly weak, but he did not expect that he would be so tired after a few swings of the wooden sword. He is aware that he has a long way to go, but he likes this feeling. Daven was born to become a martial artist. At this moment, the target falls apart in front of the guy. The blonde scoundrel apologizes for this, and says that he did not notice because of such weak mana that someone is training here, and the name of this blonde scoundrel is Reven. At this moment, Julion's voice rushes through his head, telling him that this kid is his very distant relative, and he is also one of the candidates who has every chance to win at the next meeting of True Swords, and he also reminds Daven that he has already met his father. Finally, a ghostly voice warns the boy that he should be careful, because Reven is a rising star among the heirs of offshoot families. He is the best among the children of the 13-year-old age in the Adenka family. The kid in the red robe finds out that he has to fight at the meeting of True Swords. Then he will have to fight with Vin Zen, and here he is to measure his strength, as well as to train. And again, Red Eye hears about the meeting of True Swords. This is a competition where children from families associated with the Adenka family and practitioners of martial arts gather to fight with real swords. While there is no age limit, but usually people participate in it from the age of 14, the winner of this competition is given a chance to come together in battle with the direct heir of the Adenka family, and most likely the heir who will fight against the winner of the meeting of True Swords will be Vincent, because he is useless, and the weakest among the direct heirs. Reven hopes that the black-haired man will not be scared now from a training fight with wooden swords, because at the meeting everything will not end with ordinary sticks, but Daven, as a martial artist, declares that he is not afraid of the sword. From these words, the blonde guy laughed loudly, and also noticed that apparently since Vincent is the direct heir, then he has the appropriate bragging. But the black-haired man advises Reven to also learn this art, because the provocation should be at a decent level. Daven doesn't understand how this brute can mock a relative who came here to train. The blonde is too rude. One-armed Daven was respected both on the training field and on the battle arena. Even Kajin respected him to some extent. After that, Red-Eyed says that cutting someone else's training dummy is low and declares that Reven is a disgrace for all martial artists, and he should be ashamed. Apparently his father taught him such bad manners. The blonde man successfully fell for such a simple provocation and emotionally put a sword to Daven's neck, after which he declared that he decided not to forgive the black-haired man after the moment when he dared to insult his father. At this moment, Yulion again warns Red-Eyed about the danger, namely, he informs that Reven is at the level of 2 stars and he also has the attributes of a man of steel, so Daven should be careful. His opponent is much stronger. Daven himself understood that he would lose if he fought him right now, but he reeks of an inferiority complex, which he grew up with only because he was not born in the main family. Reven uses mana, despite the fact that he knows that his opponent cannot control it due to disability. His father does not behave like an adult, and his son is not familiar with the etiquette of martial artists. How could it be understood that the level of culture of martial artists has decreased in 500 years and now the old man should be taught a lesson to the younger generation, and a good sense of understanding of the situation will help him in this? Daven put a sword to his opponent's face and said that in his time, such an impudent man in a red robe would have been beaten by the older families. Reven was dumbfounded. He doesn't understand how a kid without mana dares to point a sword at him so confidently. Since the blue-eyed man faced his sword, he already clearly felt that Daven had no chance against him, but something scared him. The aura that emanated from the demon screamed that he could cut him in half at any moment. At this moment, Red-Eyed removes his weapon and offers to calm down, because if Reven was so afraid of an ordinary wooden sword, then how can he calmly fight with him at a meeting of True Swords? With a smile on his face, he declares that everything does not end there with just a wooden sword. The blonde guy could no longer tolerate such provocations, and at the same second he rushed at the black-haired weakling. The ghost grabbed Daven's shoulders and begged the black-haired man to dodge, but the guy continued to stand motionless, because he knew that Reven would not be able to hurt him. At this moment, the guard grabs the angry blonde boy by the hands and asks him to stop, because he can't fight with Vins in here. Yulion exhaled with joy. He thought that Red Eye would not live anymore. The red-haired guard explains to Revan that if he injures Vincent now, he will be able to refuse to fight with him at the meeting of true swords, so the guy in the red robe should restrain himself. At the same time, the angry boy calls the black-haired coward and is already waiting for his revenge. Soon night fell. The ghost does not understand why Daven teased Revan, because if his escort, the red-eyed one, would definitely have been injured, but the black-haired one responds that he just taught a lesson to an ill-mannered child. Yulion does not like this answer, and he is even more angry. He does not understand why he called this strange old man, and not the powerful spirit king. However, the guy does not react particularly to the hysteria of his interlocutor and looks at his childhood portrait, but the ghost does not give him peace. He demands the red-eye to focus instead of looking at useless things, because he has yet to learn the blessings and features. Daven hears about the second for the first time, and Yulion hastens to explain to him that the features are artificially made from the power analyzed from the blessings. That is, this is an artificial blessing. Upon hearing this, the red-eyed man opened his mouth in surprise, because it turns out that from now on a person can create his own blessing, and he also believes that such a method is disrespectful to the gods and they can punish for such blasphemy. However, Yulion does not understand what the black-haired man is talking about, because no one has died from God's punishment yet. At the same time, Red-Eyed wonders if Revan also has such a feature, and he also wonders what a man of steel is. The spirit continues the narrative. He says that the blessing of the Dwarf King includes a lot of everything, but his feature is focused on strengthening the body. The more a person trains one feature, the more powerful paths open up for him. This is called the technological tree. Steel Man is a mid-level feature. Protection and destructive power are its distinguishing feature. Judging by what he heard, the black-haired man understands that many of the combat techniques of each person are focused on one trait. That's how they get a lot of power in a short period of time. It could be seen by the mannequin that the Revan cut. The ill-mannered kid showed an achievement incomparable with anyone from the time of the one-armed fighter, and now he has to fight against hundreds of such people. He has to get used to these innovations. The next day he continued his training in the courtyard. At this time the servants passing by were discussing Vincent. It's funny to them that the boy starts to choke after 2 or 3 strokes, and they also notice that for some reason he is holding a sword in his left hand, because that way he won't be able to use the image. But at this moment, their entertainment is interrupted by the deputy commander of the Merlin Swords unit. She asks the guys what's funny about the fact that a young gentleman from the Adenka family trains martial arts? But they immediately apologized and ran on to do their daily chores. Although Merlin said this, he himself understands perfectly well that people can freely call him a disgrace to the Adenka family, because the boy aimlessly swings his sword, having neither mana nor features. Merlin knows that Vincent will be doomed to the fact that people will look down on him. At the same time, Yulion is annoyed that all the people gathered are whispering behind their backs and he offers to train in the forest. But Daven understands that they do not have time and banal endurance to get to the forest, and besides, the Berserker has long been used to being looked at from high. But I didn't expect the one-armed Daven to defeat the Storm's sword. But he did it. He managed to change the booing to jubilation, and it cannot be argued that he will not be able to repeat this feat in this life. At that moment, a bottle with unusual contents appeared in front of the young gentleman's face. Merlin gave it to the black-haired man and said that it was an advanced recovery potion, and it would be much easier for the guy to train with it. The red-eyed man accepted such an unexpected gift and asked who the knight was in front of him. And then Merlin officially appeared in front of Vincent, and then the black-haired youngster hurried to clarify, is Merlin not laughing at him? However, that was how it was in the beginning, but for some reason his eyes were desperately searching for something. After hearing a decent answer, Daven says that he will remember the name of the red-haired guy and his generous act, after which he apologizes for detaining the commander and says goodbye to him. Merlin is surprised. He noticed that something has clearly changed in the young gentleman, and perhaps luck is on his side. After that, the black-haired guy continued his training. It lasted for quite a long period of time, and when he got tired, he drank recovery potions. At night he studied grammar and the laws of this new world, and in the early morning he appeared on the training field to hone his skills. Balancing on the surface with his right foot, and adding rotation with his hip, he was able to feel mana in his heart, and at the same time Red-Eye began to see him, the path of the one-armed Daven. This is the way of the sword, made and set by lines and dots to show their real abilities, and at this moment the young master of the Adenka family successfully cut the dummy into 2 even halves. Now his swordsmanship is complete. At the same time, an angry Wilson does not understand why this little cock wakes up so early to have breakfast at 5 o'clock in the morning. Daven's useless training only makes the servant work, and then the disgruntled kid comes up with the perfect plan with which he can humiliate the black-haired impudent. He puts a tray of food in front of the young gentleman's face and, opening it, wishes the black-haired man a pleasant appetite. But to Daven's surprise, instead of a decent breakfast, he received the remaining leftovers. At the same time, he tells the servant standing in front of him that if he wanted to steal something for himself, he shouldn't have done it so obviously, but Wilson pretends that he doesn't understand what his master is talking about. At the same time, Red Eye notices that Wilson forgot to wipe his mouth. However, for the first time, Daven is ready to close his eyes to such impudence, but he sincerely hopes that the pathetic servant will not dare to cross this line next time. At the same time, a scared guy crunching his knuckles on his hands says that he used to be a street thug, and although he looks harmless, he actually killed a lot of people. However, Daven only laughed at that, after which he continued his breakfast, but with the help of telepathy he said that it was very simple to control through fear, but it was quite difficult to gain a person's trust in this way, which is why he did not put pressure on Wilson by force. The servant was shocked that his master could use telepathy, because everyone knows that Vin Zen has no mana. And now this changes everything, so the black-haired man asks the employee to stop showing off in front of him and informs the guy that he will soon stop being ashamed of serving Vincent Aiden himself, and when he comes back, he will have to choose whether to live under fear or show his loyalty. But before leaving the room, Wilson declares that this will not happen, after which he slams the door, but still he was scared, because his master's composure exploded. At this moment, Marlin was walking along the training field and assessing the achievements of Vin Zen. Apparently he realized that the young gentleman came here early in the morning, when suddenly he noticed something strange, namely a mannequin. It is cut. At first he thought it was done with a real sword. However, the red-haired guy did not see Vin Zen using anything other than a wooden sword. After feeling the surface of the slice, he was greatly amazed, because such progress is impossible in just a few days. Now the deputy commander-in-chief became genuinely interested in what talent his master has, and also what kind of martial arts he is studying. Soon the black-haired man puts on clean clothes while his humble servant folds the rest. Yulion is amazed that this bastard Wilson has become so polite, while Daven himself is familiar with the kind of people who know how to take initiative, but do not know how to take their words back. When suddenly the guy paid attention to his clothes and turned to Wilson, Vincent noticed that his clothes were made of Levite and cotton, and he was very cheap and also did not harm the soil, so he was not good enough for an aristocrat. And he also makes a remark about the food. Its quality is quite low in comparison with his family budget. The ghost does not understand what all these remarks were about, but judging by everything that was said, it was possible to understand that someone was stealing money and appropriating it for himself. But looking at Wilson's stupid face, it was immediately clear that it wasn't him who did it, but someone who holds a higher position. At the same time, Revan continues to hone his swordsmanship without rest, but he still cannot forget the terrible fear he experienced on the training field, and because of this, the blonde-haired man only continued to get angry and lose his composure. After that, there was a knock on his room and soon his father appeared on the threshold. He notices that his son's training is going well, but still hurries to remind Revan that there is not much time left before the meeting of true swords. And if they want to avoid a life of poverty and suffering due to low status, then the blonde guy is obliged to defeat Vin Zen. Although the guy himself knew it perfectly well, but his father did not stop imposing it on him, and grabbing the boy for a guarantee, he said that his son was obliged to become a man from an offshoot family who would overthrow the shit branch. Revan notices that the closer the meeting gets, the more irritable his father becomes, and also his obsession grows every day. The guy understands perfectly well that if he can defeat this old bastard, then he and his family will be able to return to the old days. Soon Yulion brings Daven a strange book and informs him that it contains all the information about the participants of the meeting of true swords. The red-eyed man hurried to scroll through the book, and yes, he was convinced that it was not just their personal information, but also the techniques they use, as well as their habits. From such a guy went goosebumps, and he filled up the ghost with a fasting maniac, but he considered it a kind of compliment. Soon Daven clarifies about Julion's plan, namely, earlier he wanted to make a bright debut at the meeting of true swords by taking the power of the Spirit King. The ghost confirmed that everything was exactly as it should have been. Then he would have been able to get the miraculous stone, this stone, the crystallized mana bestowed on the champion. If you absorb it, then the body and mana will become stronger in an instant, which is why it is called miraculous. Judging by the passion of the story, we can say that the ghost desperately wants to win, but Daven cannot afford to lose, because then he will be disgraced as a martial artist if he loses with all the advantages that he has in this life. And then getting up from the table, he promises that even though he is not the spirit of the king that Yulion wanted to summon, he will definitely give him a much more significant victory that the spirit of the king could never provide. After that, the young gentleman rings the silver bell and immediately a breathless Wilson runs to him and asks what his master wants. At the same time, the black-haired man announces that he wants the guide to do something for him. Soon Wilson opens the door and asks permission to come in. The head chamberlain of Rails was sitting in the office. Looking at the careless servant, she asked what business he came to her. But Wilson could not utter a word. He was pierced with fear from head to toe, which was expected from a 7-star martial arts master. She is frightening. Soon he came to his senses and conveyed the words of his master, namely, his young master Vincent asked the head of the family to attend the meeting of True Swords in person and said that he was going to prove his worth as a member of the main 7 of Aiden. But the girl did not tolerate such insolence, and said that the head of the family had never attended the meeting of the True Swords, because he had neither the time nor the reason for this. At the same time, Wilson, as his owner said, replied that for this service, embezzlement of funds from the family budget would be forgiven. And the servant asked to make possible what is impossible. The girl asks again what the guy in front of her said, but Wilson was confused and quickly justified himself, because these are the words that the young gentleman asked to convey. After listening to all this, the woman said that was enough and asked the man to leave, after which she thought, because the guy could have come himself. But no, it would be even more effective if he personally started threatening her. Apparently he deliberately sent Wilson to show his authority. And apparently he fully realized her intentions. A gray-haired man was sitting in one of the rooms. Great strength was flowing out of him, when suddenly he stopped his training and turned to the woman behind him. Railsa arrived at Vincent's father, and announced to him that the young master had invited his father to a meeting of True Swords. But the old man does not understand why Railsa acts so stupidly and assumes that age affects her, after which she asks to stop such senseless behavior. However, the woman does not give in and says that Vincent promised to prove his worth as a member of the main family of Aiden. But these words confuse the man, and he asks Railsa herself if she thinks that the youngster is experienced enough to talk about the value of his pedigree. At the same time, the girl bows humbly and says that she does not think so, but that is why the young gentleman promised to show his value. After that, she continues to ask her master to come to this event and promises to be his notary. And she also understands the price of her actions, and if the young master cannot prove himself, then she will gladly give her head to be cut off. But the man sincerely does not understand why she does this. At the same time, Railsa announces that young Mr. Vincent took advantage of her weakness. The father wonders if he really took advantage of the fact that the girl was stealing money from the budget. These words shocked her, because since when did her master know about this? At the same time, the man said that he knew about it. She had been doing this for a long time for the benefit of Vincent, because she intended to use this money for his future. She apologizes for this brazen act, but the man says that he has no reason to interfere, because to tell the truth, she is not his servant, but that woman. Nevertheless, such a method is really in her style, expressing her intentions to her father without losing part of his dignity. It can be seen that he really is Sarvana's son. After much thought, the white-haired man rises and announces that he will attend the meeting of True Swords. The day of the meeting of the True Swords, all the participants enter the arena, and the blonde-haired Revan is angry with them. He is looking forward to getting the better of Vin Zen. Raising his head up, he notices a strange man sitting on the throne and soon recognizes the head of the family himself in the dark figure. A smile appeared on the boy's face, because he is sure that the man came just to look at him, a rising star among the heirs of offshoot families. This is his ideal chance to break the loser Vin Zen on Gallus at the head. Now the gathering of True Swords begins. Inspired, Revan tries to crush his opponent, but he blocks the attack with a shield and then swings in order to strike back, but hitting the blonde boy, his sword splits to smithereens. After that, Revan strikes and smashes the shield, as well as the opponent himself to smithereens. Seeing what was happening, the father of the blonde-haired boy jumped up from his seat and began to praise his son. Incredible things were happening in the stands. Everyone was amazed. No wonder the youngster was called a rising star. He is so young but has already received 2 stars. And also its feature of protection did not go unnoticed. Daven is standing on the sidelines and he understands this perfectly well, because by the standards of 500 years ago, all these children are geniuses, brilliant geniuses. But there is a hole in their martial arts, they get their strength mainly from their own peculiarities and no more. Looking at their wooden movements, it becomes clear that they have no experience in battles. It feels like they are controlled dolls, and only thanks to their special protection, Revan was able to attack so recklessly. After bowing to the assembled audience, the blonde-haired man mentally pays tribute to Vin Zen for not running away. But the red-fingered himself is looking forward to their fight, so he wants to win the blonde-haired impudent as soon as possible. But the head of the family himself sat silently on the throne, not giving any emotions. Soon the last opponent flew away from the arena, and at the same time Revan won this competition, and at the same time he raised his head and declared that as the winner of this competition according to the rules established by all the elders, he wants to fight with his close friend Vin Zen in the last battle of the Assembly of True Swords. And he gladly accepts his audacious challenge. 2 opponents stood on the field. Zarin is the name of the judge who stood next to them. He is a judge from the White Sword Division and requires the 2 sides to prepare. But then the black-haired man intervenes, and before they start, he has a condition. He calls his word to Wilson, and he gives him a training wooden sword. Taking it, Daven declares that he will use this blade in this match, and will also fight with his left hand against his distant relative, and also allows Revan to strike 3 blows first. A confusion of doubts arose in the stands. Does Revan's father himself not understand what this man is carrying? But the black-haired man continues. He declares that until the first 3 blows are made, he will stand still and will not take a step back. But Revan goes into a rage. He does not understand. Is Vincent laughing at him in this way? The audience was also outraged by such an absurdity from a young gentleman who does not know any martial arts. At the same time, the blond man jumps up from his seat and declares that the boy does it intentionally in order to justify his loss later. But the head, after assessing the situation, agrees to such a thing, after which he declares that it is better for Vin Zen to prove his words with actions, but he was going to do so. At the same time, the judge raised a red flag and announced the start of the long-awaited match. And he asks the 2 sides to prepare, but the young guys have long been ready to rush into battle, and at the same moment the judge announces the beginning of sparring. Revan rushes at the motionless opponent, as previously agreed, and with rage in his eyes declares that in this case it is better for the black-haired guy to die standing still. So the first blow went. Earlier, when they discussed this with Yulion, they assumed that it would most likely be a short blow, and so it is. The red-eyed guy moves his head slightly to the side and thus dodges the first blow. But Revan anticipated such an outcome, because this is an ordinary feint. His real blow will be the second. He makes a U-turn and now he is confident of his victory. But this duel seems very boring to Daven, because even without Julion's information, he sees such obvious movements. The blonde guy uses his special protection, completely forgetting about all the basics. At the same time, the red-eyed guy makes a small movement with his hand and says that the great swords are not primarily intended for piercing. With these words he pushed Revan's sword away. The blonde-haired boy could not believe his galluses, because Vincent reflected his sword with his bare hand, and to see the direction of his sword you need to be several levels stronger than him. Now the black-haired man recalls that 2 attacks were committed, only the 3rd remained. And the guy in armor, having lost his composure, thoughtlessly strikes the next blow, but Daven grabs the ill-mannered youngster by the hand and makes a small cut, after which he knocks over the insolent man. This was the 3rd blow of Revan. Now Daven is going to keep his promise to Yulion, as well as the promise he made to his father. Now it's his turn to attack. All those present were shocked by the sight they saw. The black-haired gentleman pointed the sword at the exhausted youth and demanded that he get up from his knees. At this moment the blond guy from the stands was shouted by his own father. He did not understand why his son could not cope with a guy who had no mana. But Revan himself did not know what was the matter. He could not move. Yulion was also shocked. He could not clearly see what had happened. But in fact, this is an ordinary basic martial art. A martial artist should not stand like a pillar when he does not have a sword in his hand. There are many ways to defeat the enemy without using weapons. But now the blonde-haired impudent man says that he understood what was going on, namely, he thinks that Vincent could get such a feature in such a short time, only thanks to a small god, whom he is ashamed to name out loud. Yulion took these insults badly, but Daven remained calm, because if Revan is so calmer from this thought, then let him think so. but the angry blonde boy continues his attack and announces that Daven's tricks will end at this very moment. Yulion warns the guy that this attack is dangerous, but Red Eye knows it himself. The guy calmly jumps back and swings for the upcoming attack. The blonde realizes that he has opened himself for a blow, but alas, he does not have time to do anything and gets hit in the face. However, he realizes that it does not hurt him at all. The screaming father reminds him that a sword for ordinary practice will never be able to break the protection of a man of steel. There is some truth in this. A rotting sacrum, an untrained body, a berserker can't use much power, but he can use the force of his opponent's punch. At this moment, Daven hits his swinging opponent in the stomach and he flies away a few meters, after which the red-eyed guy turns to Judge Jaren and asks him to try his best to prevent a possible tragedy. The man standing in the ring did not understand the meaning of the words spoken, but immediately after Daven made this speech, he rushed to attack. He understands that if he uses this skill at least once, his body will collapse, but still, he is going to finish the fight while his opponent is in the air. Revan, who has recovered, raises his huge sword and is about to strike back, but the berserker sees it. The point that Revan and he created, the path of the sword connecting the two of them. He asks Yulion to look more carefully, because this is a technique that he has mastered. The dots connected and soon there was an explosion of terrifying force in the arena. After the guy finished his attack, Revan's sword arm separated from his body. The two fathers were shocked by what was happening. To cut the space, twist the flow of mana and use it to break everything, including the enemy's abilities. This is fencing. The blonde boy was writhing in pain, because his hand. The judge stood at a distance, and could not believe his eyes. But soon Daven turned to the man and asked what he was doing, because the black-haired man could continue to cut off parts of the blonde's body until the judge declared victory. At the same time, Jaren came to his senses and declared Vincent the winner of this event. Soon the healers arrived at the arena. They tried to stop the blood with potions, but everything was useless. Then they decided to call a priest. While the loser was being given all possible help, the red-eyed kid was scolding the judge, because Daven asked to prevent this tragedy, and Jaren failed in his duties. At the same time, Yulion flies up to the guy and he wonders why Daven is so calm, because his body is on the limit, and he urgently needs to go to rest. But the black-haired guy knows this himself, but he will not die because of this. After he turns to his father, and says that he kept his promise. The man looked intently at his child. As the guy said, he confirmed his value to the Adenka family. After that the head stood up and announced that the winner of the meeting of true swords was Vincent Adenka, after which he invited everyone to go inside to the award ceremony. The present nobility gathered at a huge table. Soon the head opened a snow-white box and there was a miraculous stone in it. It illuminated the guests with its beautiful light. After that the man made a loud speech and took the stone out of the box in order to reward the champion of the competition. However, at this moment, a blond man bursts into the hall and announces that all this does not make sense and accuses Vincent of lying. Namely, the victim's father declares that the impudent child has taken the power of the apostle. Soon the priest joins the conversation and informs that there is a small problem, namely, the hand of young Mr. Revan cannot be attached back. The man can't believe his ears. Will his son remain one-armed forever? But the priest can only apologize. But this answer does not suit the father. He does not understand why the priest cannot attach his son's hand. Priests are facing this for the first time and it looks like she was cut off by something that their divine powers are not able to cope with, and if they do not hurry, then even the highest priest will not be able to do anything about it. At the same time, the confused man declares to the head that the forces of the devil are definitely involved here, because even a third-level priest cannot heal such damage. At the same time, rumors about this began to appear behind their backs and some began to believe it a little, because there are no other explanations. At the same time, the black-haired man asks permission from his father to intervene in this conflict, and he gives him his permission. First of all, Vincent declares that this meeting of true swords was held in the presence of the head of the ADK family, so all proceedings had to be conducted with the permission of the head, and the head, in turn, announced him as the winner of this competition. Thus the uncle's words directly denied the authority of the head, and in a public place. The red-eyed one asks Charles Adenka if he really understands the situation better than the head and that is why he doubts the decision of the head of the family? After that, Daven demands that Jaren immediately arrest this man, but he is in no hurry to do so and specifies who exactly he should arrest, and then the black-haired man unshakably says that the man was not mistaken, his friend's father, Charles Adenka, needs arrest. But when Charles heard such nonsense, he was outraged, because even if the boy is the direct heir, but how dare he do that? The red-eyed man gave a firm answer, namely, is it not enough that the blond man doubted the authority of the head, is it not enough? After that, Jaren agrees to carry out his order and immediately binds the criminal. But the man fundamentally disagrees with what is happening, then the head himself addresses him. The gray-haired man asks that Charles really does not realize he is in great debt to Vincent, because in the family of Adenka to punish a person twice for one crime, and if the black-haired man would not have tied up the man, then he would have to face the punishment of the family, and it is much more serious. Therefore, the head of how the father recommends Charles not to open his mouth anymore, and he humbly accepts this parting word. After that, the father praises Vincent for a wise act. Yulion was pleasantly surprised, because the head very rarely praises someone. At this time, the blonde-haired boy continued to suffer from unbearable pain. The priest tried to do everything possible, but it was not enough, and says that at this rate the Revan will remain a cripple forever. At this moment, a ghost flies up to Vincent and offers him something. After listening to his idea, he asks again, but Yulion is sure that this act will definitely turn in their favor, so Daven agrees to do as his flying friend advised him. The guy turns to the priest and asks if he can return the boy's hand if he uses a miraculous stone? But the man didn't even know what to answer, because this is a precious treasure that was a reward for the competition, and now the kid asks to use it? Judging by the reaction of the priest, the red-eyed one guesses that it is possible to return the hand with the help of this object. Turning to the head, the black-haired man announces that it was he who cut off the boy's hand, so he should put an end to this situation. The head leaves everything to his son. But before helping, the guy approaches Charles and explains the situation, namely, tells the man that Revan Adenka mocked him and made fun of him on the training field. After hearing this, the man does not hesitate to apologize for his son's behavior, and blames himself for everything that happened, because it was he who taught his son badly. But Daven is not satisfied with this state of affairs, because all words must be proved by actions. He takes the sword from the scabbard of the guard present, and immediately frees the man. The guy demands that Charles show remorse worthy of a martial artist. At the same time he gave the miraculous stone for the treatment of Revan. But the man does not understand what exactly the boy wants, and then the red-eyed demon declares that an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, and for the sake of the right hand, he also needs someone's right hand. The red-eyed man looked at the victim and realized what a loser he was, because although the kid was in wild pain, he was fully conscious, and even so he is silent about this situation. Apparently he has no conscience at all. At that moment, the father of the insolent man resigned himself, and decided to sacrifice his hand. It was scary. It was obvious from the man that he loved his son. For his sake he was ready to cut off his hand for him. At the same time, the desperate man swung and screamed fiercely. But Daven had previously told Zarin to prevent any accidents, and Charles's sword shattered into small pieces without touching his right hand. The terrified man breathed a sigh of relief, just like Zarin. Daven himself asked Charles to use his courage for the best case next time, after which the red-eyed man sits down on one knee in front of his father and reports that the problem has been resolved. At the same time, the gray-haired head praised his son again, and soon the black-haired one handed the miraculous stone to the priest, and also asked him to hurry, because every second counted. A guy in a white robe took an unusual artifact in his teeth and began to pray to the goddess of healing Guy to show mercy to the injured Revan, and after finishing the prayer, he cracked the stone and a miracle happened. The hand of the blonde youth returned to its place. Seeing the successful treatment, the worried father sobbed from the account. The guys certainly felt sorry for the miracle stone spent, but it was worth it. But Yulion can't stop regretting it, because this item could help even with mental problems. At that moment, Wilson was standing outside the gate. He overheard everything that was happening and then realized how cool his master was. Remembering the black-haired man's previous warning that sooner or later Wilson would have to make a choice, the servant chose loyalty, because it's much cooler. By evening, an enthusiastic Wilson came into Daven's room. He warned his young master that he would soon start cooking dinner. The ghost was surprised by such actions, but the Berserker reminds that Yulion himself wanted the guy to recognize him as a master. But exhaling the spirit, he said that he wanted much more than that. There was a sudden knock on the door, and Yulion was surprised that the servant had prepared dinner so quickly. But it was not Wilson who came into the room, but the priest. The man in the white cape introduces himself as Daven, a priest of the goddess Gaia. Daven is intensely interested in why the priest visited him, but he just wanted to express his gratitude for the help, and then the blond-haired bespectacled man opened his mouth in amazement, because the priest held out a miraculous stone in his hand. The red-eyed man does not understand why the man is ready to give him such a valuable object, but the priest's answer is simple: this is a reward for such a noble act towards the young Mr. Revan. The man became a priest to help the sick go through all the hardships and return to his normal life, but today he could not help the young Mr. Revan. The priest doubted and compared the value of the miraculous stone in human life, and then, as if laughing, Vincent held out his miraculous stone. Therefore, the minister of the church is sincerely grateful to the black-haired guy, because with his help he was able to rethink his life. The red-eyed man declares that he did not do anything like that, and the priest realized everything on his own, but accepting the stone is a suitable way to pay tribute. The man thanks the young gentleman again and soon takes out something else, namely the temple tablet. With her help, he will be able to ask for help from the church, although the man hid the fact, but he became a priest of the second class. Hearing this, Yulion was even more amazed, but the black-haired man did not realize all the greatness of this achievement. At the same time, the ghost hurried to explain how awesome it was, because the second-class tablet allows almost everything, free use of the temple, as well as endless treatment. Soon the man in the white robe bowed and thanked the guy again, because he had learned a lot thanks to him, after which Daven said goodbye to the minister of the church. Now the ghost boasts that everything was not in vain, and a much more amazing acquaintance appeared than Wilson. Daven praised his invisible friend that he was already embarrassed. And remembering about the praise, he wants to tell Daven something, namely, the head of the family often eats alone, but there was a single case when he invited one of the family members to dinner with him after the meeting of true swords. And this was the second child of Daenon. She won an incredible victory at the meeting of true swords. And then the guys realized the possibility that this case could happen again, and even though Daven's body hurts terribly, but he decides to prepare for such an event earlier. At this moment, a breathless Wilson burst into the room of the red-eyed man. He could not utter a word, but tirelessly repeated the head of the family. At the same time, Vincent finished the sentence for his servant. He already guessed that the head of the family invited him to dinner, and asked the guy to bring him to him as soon as possible. Wilson is again amazed by the genius of his master, because Vincent was able to predict even this. The guy walks down the corridor and meets a woman with a flower in her hair. Since Vincent's mother died immediately as soon as she gave birth to him, the woman opposite him was his stepmother, but despite this, he still called her mom. The girl was surprised that the guy showed incredible achievements at the meeting of true swords, and she sincerely congratulates him on this. Her name is Versa Halam. Before her retirement she was a ruthless martial artist, and for this she was given the nickname Giant. At the moment, she is responsible for everything that concerns the House of Aiden. Soon she led the black-haired man to the head and he did not greet the guy, but immediately released his aura in order to check the air. Daven found it hard to breathe. The pressure coming from his father was reflected in his lungs, but he had not felt such power before. It turns out the head hid it earlier, and now shows his real form. The guy starts a conversation and he doubts that there is a need to deliberately put pressure on his son in a private meeting. Then the head asks why the red-eyed man thinks so. But the answer was simple. His mother publicly called him father. Looking at his subordinate, the man praised his son and removed the barrier. In fact, the gray-haired guy called the guy here for two reasons. The first is to congratulate him on his victory, and the second is to check Charles Aiden's fears. After all, if you remember, the madman reproached the young man for using demonic powers or attracting an apostle. At the same moment, Daven felt a terrifying look. It felt as if he was being seen on Skaz. After that, the head asks Vera if there is a possibility that the boy is an apostle, but the woman denies this fact, and also notices that the black-haired man has some kind of assistant in the bathroom. Winzen himself still could not understand what kind of terrible feeling he had just felt. Yulion assumes that this was a feature of Mom. She has eyes that can see the truth. Despite the fact that the boy is not an apostle, he was still interested in what kind of martial art his son used, because Winzen, who could not connect the image with his heart, miraculously cut off the hand of a martial arts master with 2 stars. At the same time, a woman with a flower in her hair says that this art is similar to the fencing of the hero king. At one time they said that he swung his sword in a strange way. That's how he managed to prevent any incredible ability of the enemy. It was also said that his sword was able to subdue the furious archdemon Daven. A piece of this false story confused the red-eyed kid. At this moment, the mother takes her son by the shoulders and orders him to talk about how he was able to learn such swordsmanship. This question put the black-haired boy in a stupor. He thought that it was his father who called him here. But now his mother is leading the dialogue, and he is also being interrogated in order to find out the origin of martial arts. Vincent is about to utter a plausible explanation of this fact, but Yulion immediately stops him. The fact is that the woman opposite him is able to distinguish truth from lies with the help of her eyes, and if the Berserker tries to come up with some excuses, then, despite the lack of knowledge about that era, she will still expose him. At the same time, the guy got upset, because he is standing next to the one from which it is impossible to escape, but he cannot tell her that he is actually a man who lived 500 years ago. At the same time, the ghost asks to buy him some time, and he will definitely come up with something. But the girl was impatiently waiting for an answer. There was not much time. At the same time, the boy, with the help of telekinesis, asked Yulion to come up with suitable words faster, but the blonde youngster was so scared of her creepy look that not a single thought entered his head. At the same time, Vincent decides to cheer up his invisible friend and declares that only one step separates him from overcoming the wall of fear, and Yulion needs to take just the first step, and the rest will come by itself. And in order to inspire a friend, he promises to take the first step for him. At the same time, he tells his mother that he has received an epiphany. However, this was not the right answer. Vera did not believe in such nonsense, because the guy could not get an insight without any blessing. And the girl also explains that people associated with the dark arts receive enlightenment mainly. Vincent didn't know this, because Yulion didn't say a word about these things. At the same time, the woman threatened the guy and announced that he was behaving suspiciously, and if he so longed, then he would need to go through the holy court. At the same time, Yulion asks the red-eyed man to repeat after him, and the black-haired guy says that if a woman considers him suspicious, then she should check him through the temple, because if Vincent were evil in any of his manifestations, then a priest who owns a miracle-working stone of the third class would not see this evil spirit in the boy. Versa recognizes this stone, because it was she who gave it to Daven, and Vincent, in turn, accepted it as a gift from this priest. Having carefully looked at the guy with her own eyes, she realized that the black-haired man was not lying, because her eyes did not react in any way. At the same time, the girl asks again about the truthfulness of the fact that the seventh son learned the art of swordsmanship through insight, and he immediately answered his mother, namely, he said that he learned a lot through insight, but the guy did not learn fencing through them. Vincent says that he has been looking at the mysterious sword techniques for a long time, but decided to learn them only in the last days. The second half of the speech came from Yulion, because he really wanted to change, even if it might attract suspicion from certain people, but he decided that he would be taken for a coward if nothing else did. It was in this way that the two truths of Daven and Yulion came together, and these two Zeni were able to stand up against these mysterious eyes. The guys continued to make a speech. The black-haired man, according to Yulion, said that he felt that he had something to show, and only in this way he could surpass the Samion family and fulfill the mission of the Adenka family, and he also wanted to show how much stronger his relatives had become. And he also thought that his father would be able to make a correct assessment of what he had seen, since the temple had already confirmed, then only the decision of the head remained. After hearing the answer, the gray-haired man began to rub his beard. Versa knows that such a habit of a man is a good sign, although the head himself does not realize it, but he does it only when he is satisfied with something. Soon the father gave his permission to study this strange martial art, but the woman asked the gray-haired man about this decision, because this sword-wielding art is similar to the art of the great sword king Daven. Vera's interested. Did the man give his permission only because this art of fencing is similar to the fencing of the demon king? Because if the guy uses the art of the possession of the sword of the hero king, then the Samion family would make a scandal and accuse the swordsman of stealing their art? But the head says that he has considered all the details and made a decision. At the same time, since the head gave his approval, then it is he who will be responsible for his son, so the black-haired one should try his best not to cause any inconvenience in the future. Vincent realized that this was not just a warning. By this she also confirmed the decision of the head, and also gives her own permission. At the same time, the father got up from the table and announced that the guy showed excellent results at the meeting of the true swords, and not only that, he also proved his value as the direct heir of the Adenka family. So in honor of the above merits, the head gives the red-eyed one wish. Without having time to think, Daven says that he wants to become stronger. The father praised the guy for a good answer, but he is sure that Vincent himself will perfectly cope with this task, after which he asks again what he can do for his son. At this moment, Yulion flies up to Krasnoglasm and advises asking for access to the library, which is exactly what the black-haired man does. He asks permission to visit the family library. At the same time, the father declares that masters can enter there, only 3-star level, and asks if the son was able to connect the image with his heart. However, with a smile on his face, Vincent says that he could not achieve this, which is why he wants to take advantage of this opportunity and be a spoiled child. At the same time, the father grinned and allowed the guy to enter the library, which only 3-star martial arts maters can visit, and after that he asks his mistress to squeeze the Crimson Lotus and says that this is a reward for keeping a promise at the tournament. The Crimson Lotus is a legendary sword used by his father when he was younger. It is the most valuable relic of their family. The guy himself notices that this is an incredible sword, because even though he is a lot of years old, but he still stands sharpest. After that Daven turns to Yulion, but he was in heaven with happiness. However, the black-haired man announces that only this success will not end. At first, the younger god was disappointed because he failed to summon the Spirit King, but now everything is different. Even the Spirit King Vidal would be able to achieve such results. After that, the guys leave the house and Wilson kindly greets them at the exit, but before Vincent leaves, she praises Red-Eyed for the work done, because she is sure that the guy has invested a lot of effort in studying techniques and training. She is very proud of him, and since he won the competition, then the guy, according to the customs, I have to go to the Crimson Fortress. The Crimson Fortress is one of the educational institutes under the ownership of the Adenka family. Only those who complete the training in the fortress will be recognized as full-fledged martial artists, and the requirements for entering such an unusual place are victory at the meeting of true swords and the subjugation of a low-ranking crimson demon. The guy doesn't even know what to say to his mother, and the ghost advises him to say so. The woman did not expect such an answer, because she thought that the red-eyed man had planned everything up to this moment. Also, Versa notices that because of that old sword movement, Vincent will surely find out the terrifying pain, and she is absolutely right. In that case, she declares that in this state, the guy will never defeat the demon in his current state. After all, a monster cannot be defeated with a single blow. Yulion is surprised and sincerely does not understand why Versa gives them such useful advice, but Vincent understands that Mother began to sympathize with them, because with the help of her eyes she could easily substitute them, but did not do so. Even if he doesn't like them, but she is clearly not hostile to them. The girl wanted to continue the narration about the abilities of the Crimson Demon, but the guy interrupted her and thanked her from the bottom of his heart for the advice, after which he promised not to let down his mother's expectations and said goodbye. The girl was surprised by this act, because she wanted to warn about the peculiarity of the monster, but he just left without asking about it. Versa saw in him an amazing martial artist without a shred of fear. Her heart trembles from the upcoming results of this talent, and she also hopes that her friend Savannah, somewhere in the sky he watches his son, because today he made a big step as a martial artist. Wilson got up early in the morning and humming a melody hung up the young master's things. He was going to support his master today with all his strength. However, suddenly a powerful blow of the gods hits him on the head. The guy rubbed his head and did not understand what he did wrong this time. Sari appeared before him. She accused Wilson that he wanted to harm the young gentleman again, but the guy justifies himself, because as the girl could see, Wilson obediently performs his duties. Looking around, she really saw that the guy was working at everything. And the thing is that Wilson saw how much his young master had changed, so he, as his most loyal servant, also decided to change. But it's not that important. The maid is more interested in how is her young master? She never heard the rumors about the achievements of Red Eye. At this time, Winston and Yulion were able to get into the family library, but how many books they did not look at, they could not find a suitable one, and the black-haired man was furious because he did not find a single book with a record of the events that happened 500 years ago. And Yulion notices it too, because it is the books of this prescription that are missing from the library, and even if they found something, it would probably be only fairy tales about the Emperor of the Sword and the Great Demon. Although the ghost had predicted such an outcome, but it seems that someone deliberately erased the records of that time. After a little thought, Vincent decides to continue raising the level of his swordsmanship to defeat the Crimson Demon, and later he will be able to free his valiant name from the stigma of family shame. And since he can't achieve the image yet, then he needs a training technique. But at this time, the blonde-haired ghost was in stormy thoughts, because who is the person he called, the person who called Arslan a child, and also using the meth of the sword of the hero king? Yulion directly asked the black-haired man who is he? The Berserker thought about it, because if he tells Yulion directly that he is a great demon from fairy tales, then obviously the blonde guy will be shocked. But after thinking a little more, Red-Eyed decides that it will be disrespectful to his friend Yulion, as well as the previous owner of the body sharing the same fate with him, and exhaling, he decides to reveal his identity. The ghost himself has already caught fire with curiosity. But as soon as the guy said that his name, at the moment of pronouncing these words, Yulion experienced severe pain and could not hear the identity, after which, covering one ear, the ghost asked to repeat again what Vincent said. And this time, a terribly loud sound rang in the younger god's head, as if someone was preventing him from learning the truth. The black-haired man jumped up and knocked over a stack of lying books. He was worried about his flying friend, but he said that everything was fine, and now he asks not to repeat this speech anymore. He no longer has the desire to know who the black-haired one is. At this moment, Red-Eyed stumbles upon a strange book in a stack. It was called First Love at the Watermill. But it's strange why such a book was among the books on mana training? This is a family-run library, and the chance that an ordinary love novel will get here is zero. After opening the book, the guys were pleasantly surprised. Someone kept a secret historical record in a hidden form. This is the truth of the past. But after scrolling a little more, the faces of both guys turned red. The ghost notices that retelling the truth in such a vulgar form is terrible, but Vincent finds advantages in this, because such a record will not arouse the enemy's suspicions. After that, the surprised guy turns to Yulion, because the fact is that the main character of the novel in the book also has no image, but as a feature they have the power of love. That's how he realizes that the features are not used to awaken the mana flow, they are called upon by the mana flow, and to achieve this, you need to discard the whole theory of the image, and without the image, the freedom of mana will make all these things possible. But the ghost is shocked by the black-haired man, because if you accumulate mana without an image, you can die. But this does not stop Vincent, because right now he has in his hands the story of a man who saved mana without an image and survived, and with the help of a stream of mana and a feature, he will definitely be able to pro-aid himself. But Yulion is still worried about this method, because even with the help of an image it is dangerous to study the features. The special features are very difficult to study, so even martial artists are unable to teach them to others. But even though Daven himself recognized this method as dangerous, but he can't wait to test it. Coming out of the library, he meets a white-haired girl. She with tears in her eyes could not believe that her young master really defeated Revan Adenka. But despite such a wide spectrum from the girl standing opposite, Daven saw her for the first time, and then Yulion hurried to tell him that before him was a maid named Sari. She was leaving for a short time because of an urgent situation that had occurred in her family. At the same time, Red-Eyed was visited by fragments of memories. He remembered that there was a person in this rotten world who was blindly attached to the loser Vincent. At the same time, he confirmed the rumors that reached the girl, and she began to wipe away the protruding tears with a smile on her face. She thought that after the competition, her master would be mocked even more. The worried Berserker did not know how to calm the woman in front of him and asked for help from his flying friend. But this hopeless one declares that there was no such art in spiritual or magical teachings. At the same time, Daven decides to improvise and apologizes to the girl for keeping what happened a secret, and also tells her that he is working hard to become a person that Sari will not be ashamed of. At this moment, a guy in a red uniform appears in the yard. Turning around, the girl recognizes Mr. Revan in the boy. The guy came here to say a few words to Vincent. After a few moments, the guys settled in the room and an awkward silence arose in the room. At the same time, the maid, to dilute the tense atmosphere, offers the audience a sandwich, but Revan suddenly gets up and grabs his sword. Yulion and the black-haired guy tensed up, and then the angry Revan declared that he had come here to pay back for the events at the meeting of True Swords. Vincent immediately jumped up and grabbed his sword. He did not expect that Revan would decide to attack like this. But now he knows about his fencing skill and the same method will not work. Realizing the whole essence of the problem, the black-haired man ordered Sari to leave immediately. However, the girl could not do that, and then the blonde scoundrel declared that he was in infinite debt to Vincent, because he was able to forgive Revan's rudeness, and also gave him a miraculous stone. And the blonde man, in turn, tried to restore his hand, at the cost of his father's hand, but in the end everything was resolved without bloodshed. Revan got everything, but in the end he couldn't give anything in return. At the same time, the blue-eyed guy admits his cowardice, and now he wants to change. And after thinking about it, he decided that the most valuable thing he could provide was his loyalty. With these words, the kid bowed his head in front of his new master. Sari was stunned, because Revan himself knelt in front of her master. The black-haired man smiled at this event, but Yulion was in no hurry to rejoice, because he could not so easily believe Revan. But Vincent does not doubt the guy's loyalty, because he put his sword in front of him, and this is an act of giving his life to another person and means that the kid in front of them is serious. At the same time, the ghost really remembers something similar in the books according to the custom of martial arts. But even so, he is in no hurry to trust the blonde, but he was visited by a good idea. The black-haired man himself took out his crimson sword from its scabbard and put it on the guy's shoulder. Thereby he accepted the oath of Revan and also promised to stand by the side of the blonde youngster, as long as he was faithful to him. Revan himself was amazed, he doubted, but the sword in the hands of Vincent really turned out to be a crimson lotus, which means that he really was awarded by the head of the family. Realizing this, the blue-eyed man decides that he will not regret swearing his allegiance to such an unusual person. Sari still couldn't believe her eyes, because her master had really changed, and now those times when Vincent was called a loser seemed like a terrible dream to her. At this moment, Yulion interrupts his red-eyed friend and offers him to get the blessing of the Dwarf King from Revan. At the same time, a woman with a flower in her hair notifies the head that a promising black-haired young man plans to enter the Crimson Crevice next year. At the same time, the gray-haired father is interested in what about the conquest of the Crimson Demon. In response, Versa tells the chapter that the boy did not refuse her help and did not listen to the features of the Crimson Demon, and she also notices that the guy looked pretty confident. The Crimson Demon can be attacked with 3 stars or more, since these creatures have no physical form. The reason why his conquest is a rite of passage. This is an observation of how a person will cope with a demon, and the opportunity to prove the presence of 3 stars or more. And the most interesting thing is that they noticed how Revan Adenka started staying with the kid for the last couple of days. At this time, Blue-Eyed taught the guy to create a feature. Revan says to Red-Eye to create a loop once again. This is a very tense moment. Earlier, Vincent gave a vulgar book to his new friend and stated that he wanted to receive the blessing of the Dwarf King, through the methods described in this book. Although Revan hardly believed in the reliability of this manuscript, but he agreed to help the crazy guy. But for this, the blue-eyed one will have to direct the flow, and Vincent will have to meditate near him. In fact, the black-haired one must entrust his life to the impudent, but the Berserker does not see any problems in this, because Revan swore allegiance to him. Now that they began to actively practice this technique, Blue-Eyed wondered if he could also entrust his life? But he knew for sure that he could not, and realizing this, the blonde was surprised, because Vincent again made him a loser, but for him it's not so bad. He feels lost so joyfully for the first time. However, mana without an image, no one would have imagined that the direct heir of the family would use such a crazy way. At this time, Yulion asks the guy to be slower and more careful, but the red-eyed is unhappy that the ghost is scolding him again, because he himself offered to use the help from Revan to acquire his features. But Yulion is not going to retreat so easily, because he cannot allow the black-haired man to do whatever he wants with his body. Because right now he is just jumping off the roof in front of his eyes. Soon Revan tells Vincent that the guy is too sharp and he should be slower. Prixrak was glad that besides him there are adequate people in the room. However, Daven lived his past life like this. He could not achieve anything without risking his life, and sometimes for results you need to take risks and move on. With these words, he decided to finish the chain, but Yulion begged the guy to stop, because at this rate he could just die. At the same moment, the matter would be resolved after a few seconds. He needs quite a bit, and then the flow will be completed. He just needs to connect it. The frightened Revan tried to stop the man, because it's too early for this stage. But the guy didn't listen to anyone and successfully connected the chain. Then the sweaty Daven was glad that he finally managed to do it. However, the chain suddenly broke and a terrible explosion occurred in the building. Revan received a strong blow, but his fall was relieved by the bed. At this time, the head was checking with Versa. He was interested in when the next set would be before joining the Crimson Fortress. The same one announces that there are about 6 months left. At the same time, the gray-haired man declares that the guy has already defeated a martial artist with 2 stars, so it should be easier for him. Vincent himself rose from the dead at this time. Revan began to scold his partner, because he clearly overdid it with speed. For the blue-eyed guy, this process took 6 months, although the black-haired one is insanely fast. But Revan assumes that the red-eyed one will need at least 2 months to achieve this goal. At the same time, the head said that 1 month, That's what he asks to tell the guy that he has to defeat the monster in 1 month. Daven, littered with books, already thought he was reincarnated again. Railsa hurried down the corridor. She had to pass a message from the head of the house to the young Mr. Vincent. It also says that the guy must complete the initiation ceremony in 1 month, and the woman, realizing that Vincent does not have much time left, sincerely hopes for the success of this guy. The girl opens the door and a terrifying sight appears before her eyes. The room was completely destroyed, and the guys themselves clearly suffered because of what happened, and then Railsa politely asked the young gentleman to explain the situation. But the black-haired man hurries to calm the chief chamberlain and says that he was just meditating, but Sari, with tears in her eyes, asks the young gentleman not to lie, although she knows nothing about mana, but she knows that meditation does not exactly lead to this. At the same time, he apologizes to the maid, and Railsa notices this, because the young master's attitude to others has clearly changed. At the same time, the woman sighs heavily and skips this topic, but declares that whatever it is, he must hurry, since the head of the family gave him a message he must finish the rite of consecration in 1 month. Yulion warns his partner that his father has never changed the time frame before, and the guy guesses what this means, namely, his father has big plans for him. Railsa warns that as soon as a month has passed from this day, she will personally accompany the guy as a defender. Looking back, she hopes with all her heart that the young master will be able to defeat the monster, and she also expects that he will train with all his might to achieve this goal. But Revan is upset, because according to his calculations, Vincent will be able to receive the blessing of the Dwarf King in at least 2 months, and 1 month is too short a period of time. Red-eyed, hearing the words of the chief chamberlain, decides to hurry, but Sari begs his master not to overwork too much. At the same time, Daven promises her this and, looking at the girl, notices a huge amount of mana in her. After that he again tries to calm the maid and asks her to temporarily leave, because he needs to discuss something with Revan. After the door slammed shut, the blue-eyed guy announced that 1 month is categorically not enough, and they should find another way. However, Vincent shows them the mana chain at the same second and asks the blonde if it is correct. The blonde guys were shocked, because the guy somehow miraculously did it, and once he finished with the chain, he wishes to proceed with the manifestation of the peculiarity. Although Yulion knew that capable people can do anything, but even this is too much. Now they don't have to wait a month to exceed their father's expectations. 2 weeks later, the forest. The Berserker decided to begin the manifestation of his peculiarity. The blonde guys were eagerly watching what was happening, but before starting, Vincent asks for a twofold chance to step away from Revan, because an explosion may occur like last time. But he refuses. The guy intends to see his success with his own eyes. The black-haired man looked at his friend with a smile and began to create a magic chain. As soon as it was created, an unusual symbol appeared in the air and Yulion experienced an old feeling. Looking back, he saw a hefty dwarf in armor with a hammer in his hands. Out of fear he tried to talk to this god, and after Yulion wondered since when did he have the ability to see Boggett at such a high level? But he did not even pay attention to such a small spirit and began the process of blessing. A stunning bright light was shed on the black-haired guy, and when he opened his eyes, he saw a newfound feature in front of him. Revan hastened to explain that this is a blessing from the king of the dwarves, namely the greatest of the blessings of protection strengthening the body. Although this is a step lower than a man of steel than a blonde, but this is a big breakthrough, especially if we assume that it really didn't take him even a month to do it, then it's really frightening. Soon the king of the dwarves disappeared into thin air. Now with the strength he received, he will be able to surpass the servants in the mastery of the sword, because he founded the foundation for the conquest of the Crimson Demon. Vincent thanks the blonde for his help, but he has one more request to Revan. 2 days later, now the red-eyed Berserker is ready to go to the lair of the Crimson Demon. The black-haired man apologizes to Railsa for such an unexpected request, but he is determined to exceed his father's expectations. The woman is worried, because the guy did not even take advantage of the full term of the chapter, and 2 weeks earlier than it should be. She is not sure if he will succeed. Railsa defended those who passed the rite of initiation 3 times, and during this time there was not a single one who would have failed this test. And a woman can't afford for Savannah's son to be the first to fail. Therefore, she asks the guy to be extremely careful during the test, but the guy calms her down and declares that the chief chamberlain has nothing to worry about, because he will definitely be able to defeat the Crimson Demon without any problems. The carriage is heading into the depths of the forest, and there is complete silence inside it, but Vincent is a little upset, because he does not need a guard on such a mission, but Yulion declares that the woman is here not only for protection, but also to fix the drop flute from the monster and keep an eye on the guy. The dialogue of the guys is interrupted by Railsa. She is interested in whether the red-eyed has studied his upcoming opponent, because having 3 stars and above is the first condition for conquering the Crimson Demon. But the woman believes that the young master has not yet reached this level. Yulion notices that the guy really has never been interested in the Crimson Demon, but he asks those present not to worry. But it's still strange. Apparently Arslan arranged this test, because ironically, the Crimson Demon is the first monster that Daven defeated in his previous life. But the girl continues to insist on her own and asks the guy not to lower his vigilance. At the same time, Vincent wonders why the Chief Chamberlain is trying so hard to help him? To which the woman gives a very simple answer, because it's all because she is a guard and an observer on this test. However, Red-Eyed does not pay attention to these words and tries to get to the truth. He can't stop thinking about stealing money. The woman, in turn, says that she simply did not have enough funds, but Vincent assumes that she deliberately showed him this weakness, which he was able to take advantage of. After hearing this, the girl looked intently at the youngster. But he wants to stop this conversation, because if a woman does not want to talk about it, then he is not going to force her. Soon the horse stopped, which meant that they had arrived at the place. After getting out of the cart, the guys carefully looked around. This place is the lair of the Crimson Demon, although he does not have a specific name, but people call these ruins an old temple. The guy does not realize that there is a temple here, but then Rail hurries to tell that this is the memorial of the first head of the Arslan family. It was erected after he destroyed one of the followers of Archdemon Daven. And again Arslan, an old friend and a Crimson Demon, the guy realizes that this cannot be an ordinary coincidence. Taking out her sword, the Chief Chamberlain announced that she was ready to begin the test. At the same second she put up a barrier. The guys were surprised, because it was an amazing mana barrier. It is configured in such a way that only one monster is able to pass through it. At the same moment, a monster with a scythe appeared in front of the young gentleman. At the same time the guy asked to watch Railsa more carefully so that later he would not miss more than one detail during the report. With these words he was going to prove his value to the Adenka family. After the words were said, a crazed demon rushed at the black-haired guy and swinging his scythe, he was preparing to strike the first blow. Yulion warns his partner that he should avoid this attack, and then use the path of the sword, but Vincent does not agree with this advice, because creating a distance will be beneficial for the owner with a longer weapon, such as a scythe. And then the guy decides to get closer. The monster did not expect such actions and he has to hold the defense instead of the planned attack. The Berserker was counting on this. He's not going to let the demon swing the scythe. At the same time, he makes a series of rapid strikes, but they were all successfully blocked. In the fight against an enemy with a large weapon, the best solution would be to come close, and the red-eyed man knew this very well. But in his first real fight at the age of 14, few people could use this tactic so perfectly, and Railsa was impressed by this, because the guy looked like a man who had already conquered the Crimson Demon many times. At the same time, Vincent was impressed by the acquired feature of the Dwarf King, because with the help of it, his endurance greatly increased, and if you consider that his body is untrained, then this is a huge plus. But all this is just the beginning of his search for the path of the sword. At this moment, the guy jumps away from the scythe and jumps away for a long distance. He picked the perfect time to increase the distance. The Crimson Demon is very aggressive, but he must have been very tired due to the support of constant defense, and Red-Eye understands that, apparently, the next attack of the monster must be significant, and also have a lot of gaps. At this moment, closing points appear in front of the guys, which connect the path of his sword. Vincent is going to get rid of the recoil of his sword's skill with the help of his special feature, and uses the sword's skill, as well as body strengthening. After that, he cuts the crimson monster into pieces, and only a red core remains of it. The core fell to the ground, and turning to Railsa, he asks her if she saw everything? But the woman was excited, because judging by the guy's reaction, he really does not know that the Crimson Demon cannot be defeated with one blow, because he has 2 lives. At this moment, a newly minted opponent appears behind the back of Vincent, and he already strikes his furious blow, but the mysterious guy meets him with a smile. The worried Chamberlain shouts to the youngster, but he already knew what to do. The guy immediately dodges the deadly attack and realizes with a smile that the monster has not changed a bit in these 500 years, when suddenly the tip of the scythe flashes in front of his face, but he manages to evade this as well. However, the black-haired one realizes that the monster has become faster, and if you look, the appearance of the Crimson Demon has also changed, yet the red-eyed one understands that these scoundrels have also evolved over the past 500 years. However, this is not news for Railsa, because everyone knows that the revived Crimson Demon goes into a rage, and his speed and strength improves. At this moment, the young master began to be suppressed, but he continued to successfully dodge, but now his escape route is blocked by the wall behind. At the same time, the monster strikes a vertical blow, and the remains of the temple behind the black-haired man suffered changes. At the same time, Yulion offers to change plans. But Daven says that it's not the time for this yet, and they have to first make the monster lower his vigilance. Because the demon thinks the same way, he tries to corner them for the sake of delivering the final blow, and when he is fully prepared for it, then the Berserker will realize his plan. Watching this sad picture, Railsa kept herself in hand so as not to get into the fight, because her intervention as an observer would mean the defeat of the young master, so she asks for help from her dead friend, because she does not want to destroy the future of his son, Lady Sarvan. In the past, the purple-haired woman extended a helping hand to Railsa when she was in trouble and invited her to join her journey to become a martial artist. After leaving the ruined family, Railsa survived by farming on the border of the country, and it was enough shock for her to meet such a monster as this Optimus girl. At first the chief chamberlain considered the long-haired crazy, but Sarvana asked to join her journey and Railsa could not refuse such a lovely girl. At that time, Sarvana was traveling with Khan and Versa, and they were not against the fact that another traveler would join them. At that moment the exhausted girl believed that she had finally lost her mind due to a head wound during a fight, or maybe she was influenced by Sarvana's bravery, but in the end she joined him in their adventure for the sake of becoming an Aiden legend. It was a wonderful time in which the main characters were Lady Sarvana and they were a great team with her. In her memory she remained impossibly strong and beautiful, she had the power to make people smile. In the hopeless life of Railsa she was a ray of light. But one day Sarvana died. The girl could not hold back her tears, but her mistress left behind her legacy, and then Railsa firmly decided to protect this child from the harsh life of a child, the heir of the main family of Aiden, until he becomes a respected martial artist. However, fate was cruel. The guy was born a loser who had to crawl on his knees in front of his younger ones. Railsa saw it all. For 14 years, she counted hundreds of similar cases of bullying. At the same time, the thought of leaving the Adenka family began to flash through her mind, because she was unable to continue looking at this loser Vinzen, until one day she caught stupid Wilson, who was lying behind the door. The frightened guy hurried to explain himself, and announced that he had acted like a servant of young Mr. Vinzen. And then the girl heard from the impudent man those words that she did not expect to hear in this life, namely, the young gentleman was recognized by the head of the family. Then she finally saw a ray of hope again, and therefore she sincerely believes in her young master. After all, he can't stop at this stage. A crimson monster swung at the black-haired guy once again, and at the same time Vinzen gave the command, and at the same moment a red figure ran out of the forest and blocked this incredible attack, and it was a Revan Adenka. The blonde-haired man barely blocked the Crimson Demon's attack. Railsa was shocked by what was happening. She did not understand where the Revan Adenka came from. Did he really plan to help the young Gosopton in this difficult battle even earlier? Vincent himself gives the baton to his friend and said that he is counting on him. The same one asks the black-haired man to hurry up before he drops his sword. The red-eyed man sits down on the ground and begins to meditate calmly. From what he saw, the chief chamberlain lost the power of speech, because judging by what is happening, she decides that he has completely lost his mind. After all, meditating in such a situation is tantamount to suicide. If Revan is pushed away, and even if something slightly touches the young master, then he will die. But despite this, Revan continues to defend his comrade and repels the monster with a scythe, after which he swings and prepares his next attack. But the blonde is not going to stand still and declares, since the demon did not lose to Vinzen, then he deserves to become his prey. With these glories, the guy uses the peculiarity of the Steel Man and calmly blocks the monster's blow and even manages to mock the Crimson Demon, because his attack turned out to be much weaker than he imagined. But the monster in the red robe continued to strike. At the same time trouble was waiting for the blonde. His sword began to collapse, because the effect of the steel body is not transmitted to the weapon, and this bastard aimed at his sword. At this moment, the demon strikes the final blow and destroys Revan's sword, but now the situation is terrible, because without a weapon he will not be able to protect Vinzen. The demon makes the next attack, but the guy manages to stop it with his bare hands, but it was very difficult for him, his whole body was experiencing maximum tension, and it was getting harder for him to hold this piece of metal with every second, and soon he screamed with a call for help to the sitting Vincent. At the same time, a voice was heard from the side, who praised Revan, after which the black-haired man used the art of sword possession and cut the demon, along with its core. Red-Eyed once again expressed his gratitude to Revan, but he himself was glad to participate in this. At this moment, Railsa takes the young master away and clarifies, was this really the young master's plan? She congratulates him, but she believes that the head will not appreciate such an outburst, because the guy did not act alone, and the chief chamberlain is interested in how he was going to exceed his father's expectations with such a performance. However, the guy calmly responds to Railsa and says that she is getting ahead of herself too quickly, because his performance is not finished, but the chamberlain does not understand what the red-haired man wants to convey. At the same time, Vincent mentions that the woman created a mana barrier so that only one monster could enter, and once the first one died, then the second one should come for them. And the victory that she had just seen was for Revan, so the blonde was able to show his determination. Well, now it's time for Vincent to show himself in action. With these words, the black-haired guy bites the miraculous stone, and at the same second his body is filled with a huge amount of energy. However, Vincent understood that even with the strengthening of the body, he would be able to use the art of swordsmanship only twice, and he meditated in order to determine the effectiveness of the miraculous stone. The moment the monster approached, Black-Eyed once again used destructive sword arts. Only the core remains of the demon. It shows when the monster regenerates, and with such an opponent who has many vulnerabilities, the guy can easily find a way for his sword. At the same time, he uses a double art of sword possession. Seeing this, Railsa was stunned, but soon breathed a sigh of relief, because all her worries were in vain, and then she realizes that her young master is amazing. The guy coughed up blood and barely kept on his feet. Yulion appeared next to him. The ghost was interested in what kind of art Vincent used, that after him the body turned out to be in such a state. However, the black-haired man was in no hurry to talk about it, and said that if there were no peculiarities, meditation or a miraculous stone, then such a thing would be impossible. Seeing how bad Vincent is, the blonde-haired spirit offers to rest, because even if he turns off, Railsa will take care of him. However, the black-haired man does not agree with this, because the real winner is the one who stands firmly on his feet until the very end, and he promised himself that he would never fall. Railsa approached her master, when suddenly a huge circle of summoning covered the area, but the chamberlain did not receive any information about him during the initiation ceremony. A huge monster appeared in front of the girl from a pile of stones, namely this relic of the guard. But the fact that it has not yet been discovered before this time means that most likely it was created together with the temple. The woman officially introduces herself and says that she is a servant of the current Adenka family. After that she demands that the guard tell about his mission to a member of the main Adenka family, and show due respect. But the stone monster did not pay attention to the words and began his attack. Railsa's appeal was useless. She realized that the relic was functioning improperly, most likely because of its ancient age. At the same time, the chief chamberlain asked the young Mr. Revan to take Vincent and leave here, after which she was going to confront the stone monster. Railsa, entering cold-blooded mode, used the art of wielding the Beladian sword, the 7th chapter. At that moment, a huge explosion occurred from the back of the guys. They turned around and saw a terrifying sight. Railsa was swallowed up by a stone monster, but a moment later the snake was covered with ice, and after the impact it crumbled before their eyes. This was the level of 7 stars. However, the exhausted Vincent says that's not all, but the blonde does not understand what the guy is talking about. At the same time, the black-haired man pointed to the place and struck a blow that flew near Railsa, after which the young gentleman lost consciousness. Looking at this, the girl could not understand what was the matter and why the boy sent his sword into the void. Turning around, she noticed the tiny beetle. This was the real form of the guard. Without having time to look back, the beetle headed for the children. At the same time, the chief chamberlain did not have time to think and, sitting down, she used her blessed feature of the Milky Way Wanderer. At the same second, the figure of a girl appeared near the guys and an attack flew in front of Revan's face, cutting the guard. Then she clarified the condition of the two. But still she could not feel the presence of the true form of the guard. She assumes that most likely this is due to the fact that the building is very old. However, her young master noticed him and Dade warned her in such a state, but she couldn't figure out how. At the same time, Vincent distracts the chief chamberlain from these thoughts, and says that most likely this is what the guard was protecting, An ancient chest stood in front of their face. Railsa opens the old treasury and takes out the guard's bone, saying that this relic was most likely left by the first head of Arslan. Yulion also did not stand aside and told the red-eyed that the dragon bone is an incredibly rare magical relic. It is a priceless treasure. Vincent himself suggested that this is the reason that Arslan created the rite of initiation. Soon, Railsa got down on one knee and offered to take the relic to her young master, because a large number of swordsmen from the Adenka family passed this ceremony, but it was Vincent who managed to find it, so it should belong to him. But the guy is in no hurry to accept such a valuable gift, because such a trophy should be given to the family through the church, and the girl can get into trouble if someone finds out about this trick. But the woman declares that she will cope with this issue. At the same time, Red-Eyed offers to act a little differently. He takes out a sword and cuts the trophy into pieces. From now on he will be an accomplice to this crime. He wouldn't have been able to get this treasure if it wasn't for Railsa, which is why he asks to take her half. The grave of the heads of the Adenka family, the cemetery of swords. The chief chamberlain came from the ceremony and informs the head that young Mr. Vincent has successfully passed the rite of consecration, but Khan says that such information should be reported to the church. At the same time, the girl turns to the man again and informs him that she has found something more significant than this, so she decided to visit the chapter first. The man can't wait to hear the details. At the same time, Railsa says that Ravana Adenka was influenced by a young gentleman, and the blonde youngster even risked his life to resist the attack of the Crimson Demon. In addition, she reports that young Mr. Vincent successfully coped with the conquest of the monster. But the head is not satisfied with such news, because judging by what he heard, it was possible to understand that the task was too difficult for Vincent, and that is why he had to use such tricks. But the woman says that this is not all. After that, the black-haired guy alone defeated another Crimson Demon, and he also found a dragon bone left by the first head Arslan. The woman claims that now she has only half in her hands, which the young gentleman shared with her. However, the head was surprised. He repeated the word shared, and clarified, did Vincent do it himself? The girl confirms the words of the head as if nothing had happened and repeats that young Mr. Vincent cut the bone with his sword. At the same time, the head declares that the rail misses some detail, but the girl does not understand what is the matter. At the same time, Khan orders her to break this dragon bone. Confused, she puts the object on the ground and strikes a normal blow, but nothing happened. Seeing this, Railsa apologizes to the respected ancestors of the Adenka family and asks them to forgive her for this impudence. With these words she uses her most powerful ability, the North Wind. At the same time, the bone was covered with ice, but immediately freed from the ice offset. Railsa could not understand what was going on, because she used her strongest attack. At the same time, Khan said that only a blacksmith of the highest class is able to break a dragon bone. At the same time, glancing at his father's sword, the head thought that his turn would soon come. At the same time, turning his back to Railsa, he asked the girl to take care of his son, because as it turned out, he has a special power. Wilson appears on the threshold, all in tears, but the maid asks him to be quiet, because the young gentleman needs rest. But the guy can't calm down, because after Vincent has passed the initiation ceremony, Wilson will have to go to the Crimson Fortress with the owner, but he is afraid of this place, because the Crimson Fortress is full of scary monsters and even more frightening martial artists. At the same time, Sari is surprised and says, is the street thug Wilson afraid of monsters? But while the servants are having fun, Vincent is interested in something else. Then he turns to Yulion. Has he not noticed the mana emanating from Sari's body yet? But the ghost does not feel anything like that, and also he has lived with her much longer than Daven, and he is sure that he would have noticed it. But the black-haired man himself is sure that he saw a similar flow of mana 500 years ago. At the same time, he decides to find out what name the maid has, and she immediately replies that she comes from a ruined Hisley family. At the same time, this confirms Vincent's guess, as he thought the girl has a magical body. However, this is the first time Yulion hears about the Hisley family, and has also not heard anything about the magical body. Vincent hurries to explain all this to his young friend. He tells that the Hisley family studied mana and the body, and it was they who learned about the existence of the divine sacrum at the time, and also this family has an ability, and it is called a magical body. Like the divine sacrum, it allows you to fill the owner's body with mana. Yulion was surprised, because if this is the case, then a magical body can prevent death from a rotting sacrum. At the same time, the black-haired man asks if the girl knows anything about the Hisley family. For example, is there a head? Sari clamped down, and then Wilson intervened in the conversation, who asked if the young gentleman knew the reason why Sari came to the Adenka family. At the same time, the maid lowered her eyes and began her story. Her grandmother died and she was the only relative Sari knew. Hearing this, Vincent apologizes for his tactlessness, but the girl says that everything is fine. However, I wonder why a family with such abilities went to the bottom. The answer is one: most likely it is the tricks of the Samion family. If they were really trying to hide the existence of the divine sacrum, then first they had to shut the mouths of its discoverer, namely the Hisley family. At this moment, the girl remembers that there was another person from this family whom she knew, but she had already died. Namely, it was the mother of young Mr. Vincent, Lady Sarvana. She was also from the Hisley family. However, Winston, along with Yulion, hears this for the first time. At the same time, Sari says that apparently because of this, it is not forbidden to mention the name of Lady Sarvana, because the head always looked sad when he heard her name. The black-haired man's mother has always hired people without discrimination, even from broken families, and these servants in front of the young master are also here thanks to Lady Sarvana. Especially the head chamberlain. She was at rock bottom until Lady Sarvana personally brought her to the Adenka family. Hearing this, Yulion notices that his mother was an amazing person. Vincent also realizes that this is most likely why Railsa is looking out for him. At this moment, the chief chamberlain knocks on the young gentleman's room and opens the door. She informs Vincent that Mr. Revan is leaving. Daven comes to say goodbye to his friend. The blonde-haired one can't stay here forever. Besides, he has already helped kill the Crimson Demon. But Vincent declares that he has one more request, and Revan, hearing this, immediately became animated. Vincent asks him to look into the history of the Hisley family 500 years ago. Then the guy with a grin remembers that vulgar book on which Vincent studied and says he will gladly fulfill this assignment, after which the guys say goodbye and Revan leaves the estate. At the same time, the black-haired man turns to Rails and declares that he has learned something new about his mother, and wants to know if the woman's kindness to him is true, a way to repay his late mother? Railsa says that everything is true. At the same time, the black-haired man asks the girl for a favor. He asks her not as Sarvani Adenka, but as Vincent Adenka, namely, he wants the chief chamberlain to train him until he goes to the Crimson Fortress. He insistently asks for it as a martial artist. At the same time, Railsa closed her eyes and mentally turned to her late mistress. She did not know if she could shine her loyalty to young Mr. Vincent, but she knew that she would never hear the answer of Mrs. Sarvana. At the same time, she apologizes to her for her weak determination and declares to Vincent that the training will be cruel, but Red-Eyed was counting on it. The training ground of the Adenka family. The chief chamberlain explains to the guy that the guy can get a feature without having an image, but for this he must link the chain with mana and with the feature. After that, Railsa says since the guy asked her to train as a martial artist, she will not tell him everything just like that. The girl took the sword, but Vincent is surprised that she did not take her sword, which she used at the initiation ceremony. The girl says that her sword's name is Black Moon, and he will be able to meet him when he becomes worthy of it. Now the black-haired man has 5 months before leaving for the Crimson Fortress, and if he manages to wound her at least once with his strange way of the sword, then she promises to give him her peculiarity. After these words she smiled maliciously, and wished him good luck. However, the black-haired one is worried. Didn't she see what he did to Revan? At the same moment, Railsa appeared in front of him and asked the young man, is she really so similar to the young Mr. Revan? At a loss, he strikes, but the girl easily dodges such a thing. The woman with glasses claims that she is also familiar with the power of the sword path, so she is not going to give him a chance to use it. Daven realized how dangerous this seemingly harmless woman was, because just a second ago she was aiming at his head. It was very dangerous. Soon, Railsa says that she has heard that the young gentleman has become friends with the priest Dellen, so she offers to ask him for help if she needs it. At the same time, Winston notices that she is too cruel. In response, Railsa smiled, because she had warned that she would not make allowances. A week later, Vincent continued to train desperately with the chief chamberlain. He was about to strike another blow, but Railsa was already behind him, after which she delivered her crushing blow. The guy was driven into the ground. The woman offered to stop there for today, because 2 attacks of his sword technique in a row is the limit of Vincent, and if they continue, it will only bring new injuries. But still, Railsa notices that the guy has become much better, because a little more and her blade will break again. During these trainings, she has changed a huge number of swords, so she decides to complain to the blacksmith. Railsa appeared behind the dwarf's back and stated that the title of master is not the only thing that the blacksmith has lost since their last meeting, and also notes that it would be sad if such a blacksmith under the name Hansen supplied garbage to the arsenal of the Adenka family. The man did not immediately recognize the girl and assumed that she was really a follower of Sarvana, and he did not understand why she had come to bother him in the middle of the night. At the same time, Railsa invites him to take a look at it, and looks out a bunch of broken blades and explains that she has used these swords for the last week, and used them only in sparring. She can't continue to let the blacksmith supply them with such fragile swords. But the dwarf is surprised. He understands the girl's puzzlement, but still notices this strange. At the same time, after a short thought, Hansen asks the woman if she really fought against a monster with sharp teeth. However, the answer was negative. Then the dwarf asked another suggestion: maybe she managed to fight a martial artist with 9 stars and above. However, this is then he assumes that it was a magician who has more than 7 runes. But Railsa decided to ask him directly, does he really consider her immortal? At the same time, unable to endure these questions, he says that Vidal Hansen will take this person for a great sword, but she fought against the Crimson Lotus, which is in the hands of young Mr. Vinzen. Hearing this nonsense, the man flared up. He did not understand why such a loser had a Crimson Lotus at his disposal. Soon Railsa let the boy. He did not understand why he came to them at such a late hour. At the same time, the girl apologized for such a late meeting, but she could not do anything about it because the gentleman in front of him wanted to see the Crimson Lotus very much. However, Hansen chuckled and said as if there was a reason why he couldn't see his creation. The sleepy guys were shocked by what they heard, and Yulion realized in his pajamas that the dwarf in front of them was the great smith Hansen. He is the person who, if desired, can even summon the Khan, that is, the head of the clan. The ghost explains to Vinzen that the dwarf is a long-time friend of his father and a former master associated with the Adenka family, but the black-haired one does not understand why the dwarf is a former master and is interested in what happened. Yulion reports that a few decades ago he stopped making great swords and focused on producing a large number of ordinary swords. Other blacksmiths looked down on him because of his obsession with money, as a result of which the dwarf lost his honor and place in the Adenka family. After hearing this, Winston says that this blacksmith is incredible, but Yulion does not understand why. At the same time, the black-haired man explains that many people were able to survive thanks to this man. He prioritized the survival of other people and not his honor. At the same time, Vinzen respectfully bowed and introduced himself to Master Hansen, as manners suggest. However, hearing that he was called a master made the blacksmith laugh a lot, and he noticed that the guy knows how to suck up to others. However, Vincent said that he did not belittle the blacksmith, because the master chose the right path. After hearing this phrase, the dwarf remembered a long time ago, because once the current head of the Adenka family told him exactly the same words. Khan knew that his friend would be criticized because of such a decision, but he is sure that this is the right way. Khan noticed that apparently they have it in the family. At the same time, the blacksmith says that he previously considered the 7th son ugly, but he suspects that these were false rumors. Vincent decided to take such dubious words as a compliment.